morning. Great morning. Welcome back to another Nudelberg Daily Huddle, which again, it feels like Tuesday, but it's Wednesday. So my schedule's a little jacked up. This 4-day week is definitely messing with my clock a little bit.
And I'm also traveling Friday, which makes it exponentially harder for me.
So it's a 3-day week for you.
The whole thing is messed up. I don't know what day it is. I'm kind of keeping my head down. But Lori, good to see you again. Always happy to be
here. I definitely don't know what time it is here or day it is. I'm on the beach.
Lori, can you show us your view? We didn't get that yesterday.
Yeah.
I think, everybody should know what you're looking at this morning.
Oh, wow. That's
what I'm looking at.
Look at that. Looking at the beach. And did I hear you say that you took a 4-hour walk yesterday?
4 mile, not 4 hours.
4 mile. I was about to say.
What's that? That
we don't
want to
push it. We don't want to push it here.
That's
okay.
pushing it.
Oh, I was like, I can't do
I don't have that much
4
time
hours.
left in my life for 4 hours of a walk. Okay.
4 miles though. That's a long walk.
Yeah. Hey, my train is tough. I got to be able to report back.
Oh, I love it. The Get Jake has you on the maintenance plan while you're gone. That's fantastic. Well, there was a ton of great feedback yesterday from our conversation about Dion. And of course, there's so much more to be talked about. So we are going to continue the conversation about how to be great. What do you got, Jake? What?
Shout out Ben Shelton. Shout out to if you're a U.S. Open fan, look, the football team might have let us down, but we have the youngest U.S. Open semifinalist, American semifinalist in the U.S. Open. I did see Christian White, by the way, yesterday. A really funny story. I went for a lunch run at noon, and sure enough, somebody honks, and they're like pointing. And I kind of just pointed back. And then as I got further, I was like, is that Christian White? So it was actually funny. So I saw him. And then also me and Pops were at Jay Alexander's yesterday, sitting at the bar. Bartender, serves us whatever, takes our orders for the salads. And he goes, is your name Nudelberg? Yes. Yeah. He goes, and you guys do the Daily Huddle? Yes. He goes, I know Greg Goldstein very well. I see all his stuff. I help him freelance write. And so we ended up texting Greg. And sure enough, Greg ended up walking in, which was
awesome.
Oh, that's funny.
It was hilarious. They were meeting at Starbucks. So just super cool to see our network and, just awesome.
Random run-ins. I love that. Lori, how was your Tuesday in Marco?
It was good. But I failed PTO again. I failed PTO.
Shocker.
I tried not to work after I got off the huddle. I was going to take the day for myself, right? Work on some things, personal thing. And you just get pulled in. People texting you, emailing you, hey, I need this, or
Lori, if you go to the top corner of your phone and you just slide that down, there's a little icon that looks like an airplane.
Yeah.
And if you hit that button, it doesn't let anything come into your phone. It completely just stops it.
I could have tried that.
Are you an airplane mode person more than a do not disturb person?
I wrote about, airplane mode, do not disturb. There's so many different ways to stop the notifications from coming in.
But then once I started, it was like, oh, let me follow up on this. Oh, let me email that person. Because, it's like, it pops in my head. So I said, let me just do it. I know, you're right. But I did go for
bullshit. Bullshit.
What it is.
He's using my own bullshit.
The bunch of bullshit. So it's a great morning, great start to the morning. Let's get this thing woke up, and then we'll continue the conversation. There's one more video from Dion that popped up yesterday that I want to drive the point home. So let's wake up, and then we're coming back to talk a little bit more.
Wake up, everybody. Get up, get up, get up, get up. Wake up, come on, come on. Wake up, everybody. Teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen what you have to say. Wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed.
Yes, Chris Pollock says airplane mode is great until your wife is trying to track you down. That is why I like the do not disturb button, because you can set the settings on do not disturb to allow a few people to bypass the notifications. So like if you have your wife or you have your kid's school or something that like you want to be interrupted for because it would have to happen, like you can allow those through, but it blocks out all of the other notifications, social media, email, everybody else that's trying to get into your world. It's a great way to set boundaries. But continuing the conversation from yesterday, right? Of course, Dion is doing his media obligations after the game and, midweek. And he was on with Michael Irvin and Skip Bayless yesterday. And they had a question to ask him about his belief in winning. And I want to talk about his answer. So Shay, play us the video.
So, Dion, when you walked out of the locker room for kickoff, did you think you could win or know you would win?
Skip, before we left Boulder, we knew we were going to win.
Wow.
There wasn't no thinking. Like
that's what Mike said.
That's my natural odor. Like we prepare for this stuff. This is not just a figment of my imagination. This is something that we prepare for and we think about and we work towards. Situational football that we practice with. Nobody said nothing about the conditioning. We were conditioned. We were well. We were drinking nothing. Yeah, water, Gatorade over the last 2 weeks. Like we were prepared for this. We stopped, and I changed practice several days. We stopped in the middle of the practice and ran 7 gases. Then we continued to practice because I wanted to know who was going to fatigue, who was going to cry, who was weep, who was going to say, "Poor little old me." We prepared for this thing, and we're continuing to prepare. That's the way we think, Skip. I'm sorry, that's the way we think.
We prepare for this. And that to me is just blind belief is bullshit. Give me bullshit, Shay. Give me bullshit for blind belief.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit.
The
hey,
belief.
Listening to that, because happy birthday was nothing.
For sure. Yeah, I'm shocked that the curse word wasn't his first word. But so, and you and I have gone back and forth on this about confidence, right? Like none of those kids, very few of those kids had ever played a game for the University of Colorado, right? Never mind, in a game of that magnitude, right? 20-point underdogs, they walked in with confidence that they would win that game. Not because they had won before, not because they had done it before, but because of the way they prepared to win that game. And so this is where I think we could talk about defining what the work is and putting in the work to have the belief. You can't just believe and say, we're going to win, it's going to be great, and sit on your ass for 8 months and expect to win the game. They put in the work in the weight room. They put in the work in the film room. They put in the work on the practice field. And he talked about situational football. And we could go in and I could break down the details of what he's talking about, but that's not really the point. The point is he understands how to define the work and then hold everybody accountable to the work. So there's no question. We believe we're going to win because of what we've done. And I think that's the thing that everybody needs to take home.
I think, another point, he does such a great job of creating internal motivation in his players, and he talks about his son specifically, but he's consistently pointing out to these players these little things that give them an extra drive, that he knows them so well. He calls them their sons, calls them his sons, but he knows exactly what makes it tick. And as a leader, that's important to understand what's important to your people or your players, your direct reports, to get them to another level. Sometimes they're not going to get there, or, Dad always says it, I have a higher expectation than you, which is a problem, and so finding a way to raise those people's beliefs to where they're supposed to be or where that they can be is a really incredible talent. I think he does an exceptional job of.
And Michael Irvin spoke to the team during fall practice. There's a video out there, and he says it's not of course you have to hone your skill, but it's also about the will, right? About putting in the hard work to make sure, right, that you're putting your skills to use, but skill and will. And he said it isn't just the skill, it's in here, right? When I point to my heart, right? That's that drive, that grit, that you want it so bad, right? And you want to prove everybody wrong.
And so we had this conversation yesterday about shifting culture and what he's done to get them to be able to compete the way they were right now. And that lesson, I think, transcends sports. It goes into anybody who's responsible for a team, a department, or an organization. But I want to have this conversation because he talked about in the middle of practice for this game, he stopped practice. So we're going to run 7 gassers, and then we're going to continue with practice. And I want to see. We're gonna condition. Obviously, it's important for us to be. But what he was also looking for was who's gonna quit, who isn't really bought into that mindset, who is in all the way until maybe 85%, but not in for the full 100, and wanted to create another test for himself. So I think. Oh, hello, hi. Do we just want to join the huddle today? Hi, we have a guest. We have a guest speaker. And it's Julian.
Oh, Huddler in the hot seat.
He's decided to join us today.
Was he?
You gonna sit with that, or are you gonna go?
He is the king.
He's the only guest we allow to pop in like that.
But it's creating those scenarios.
He's really good at opening doors.
But it's creating those scenarios. You know, I think you talk about the sprints and putting your people in the position that, like, replicating it. You know, I watch Suits. I watch Suits a bunch now, and if you're not watching Suits, I think you're losing out.
I binged last night
because you can't stop once you do start. Mark hasn't started, and I can't believe it, but they do mock trials before they go. You know, every time, and they start throwing curveballs at them to see how they're going to react before it's time. And we talk about it all the time with our clients. There's no practice situations that we're putting our people in. Zero. They're not having virtual coffees with their coworkers, or they're not running through the plays. I'm going to use a sports term here that are going to be run. You're going to be tired in the fourth quarter when you have to run the counter. You're not going to be at the beginning of practice where you're fresh. You know the look it's coming to. So you have to condition your mind, because that is where the confidence comes from, because you've been in those positions. And the more you practice, the better you'll perform.
You know,
I agree with you.
I want to go back to something Mark said. Mark, you talked about he wanted to wean out, right, who was a quitter, or he wanted to see what they were made of. And that goes back to, in the business world, right, who fits into the culture and who doesn't fit into the culture. And you asked the question yesterday about, you know, when do you know?
Right.
When do you know that someone doesn't fit into the culture? You know, I'm sure Dion figured it out pretty quickly. Right, especially when he's doing those things, testing. He's basically planting tests right in there to see it. But I think in the business world, within the first 90 days, you start to see who somebody is and whether it fits in. And as Maya Angelou says, when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
So I think 90 days is always a good test. We talk about those numbers all the time, like 90 days to figure it out. You're going to find out some people immediately. Sure. And he did too. He gave everybody the choice. Like, look, and I'm sure there were very few people that were like, oh yeah, I'm out right now. Right. I'm sure there was a very small percentage that were like, I'm gone. I'm sure some of them he showed the door quickly because he was able to evaluate their film from previous years and get some insight into who they were and push them out that way as well. And say, hey, look, I'm just telling you, I don't think you can stay if you want to. I'm telling you, there's an unlikely chance that you make it here. And you push people out that way. But there's people who say yes, and then you define the work and you start to put people through the work. How long do you give somebody to really adopt the behavior and change? How long do you get? What's the timeline to say, because look, he's still testing. It's right before the game. So they're a full 9 months into building this culture, and he still wants to find out. He's still pushing just a little bit harder. So is there a certain amount of time that you, as a leader who's coming in to change a culture, you're taking over a new team, you say, okay, at 90 days, we're going to make some decisions. But even after 90 days, how long, unless Gusky says like 90 to 120 days max, what's the timeline? And how do you make sure that you're making the right decision or doing everything you can to make the right decision?
Go for
I don't know. I don't know if I think that that there's a formula for every single one, right? I think that each case is unique and different. I think if you're honest and open, you'll be able to tell if someone's willing to. I do believe people can change if they want to, right?
Yes.
I've changed as a leader because I want to, right?
Yes.
So I do believe that if you bring it to their attention and you work with them and you coach them, right, and you tell them about situations, how could you have handled this differently, right? How could you have fit into the call? I think it's different for everyone. So I don't think I can give you one answer.
It goes to the feedback loop. Like, what are you doing as a leader to aid in that development? Like, because there's plenty of companies that they hire people, and we talk to the people that get hired, and they're like, they gave me nothing. Right. So you're judging someone off 90 days when you gave them nothing. It's going to take them 30 days just to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. So I think when Lori says that, and football is a completely different thing because the eye's in the sky every day. Like you're with those kids every day. You're seeing what they're doing every day. You're seeing what they're doing in the classroom. You're getting reports every day. You're watching them at practice. You're watching them in workouts. You're getting reports from their position coach. And so when you try to compare the two of them, I think they're very different. I want
so this is the point that I was hoping we would get to was visibility, right? In sports, there is a ridiculous amount of visibility, right? There's visibility into class attendance. There's visibility into class grades. There's visibility into tutoring attendance and tutoring participation, nutrition, weight room, practice. You have visibility into everything that everybody on the team is doing, except for what's outside the walls. That you have to rely on them for the question asking and finding out yourself and assuming they're telling you the truth. I think in the majority of businesses, the visibility to the work is so poor that's the reason people management or people development is so hard, because you're making blind decisions. You're making gut feelings. You're going with what you think. You're going with what you feel. And there's not enough real data there for you to go, listen, regardless of whether you want to do this job or not, I've got X amount of time that I've spent with you in development. I've given you X amount of opportunities. Here's the way you've operated in those. And here are the things that you didn't do well, that you continue to not do well. At this point, can't afford to continue to spend the resources to have you in a role that you're not able to excel at. That conversation happens very few times in the business world.
And I think it's important that I think you're obviously a lot more hands-on in the beginning with new people. You know, you're taking an interest, or most leaders are, you know. And so when you say 90 days, a lot of the times you're monitoring them very intensely during those 90 days, or you're looking for reasons either to keep them or not to keep them, or why it's working. I think there has to be a little extension of where you start to give them autonomy and you start to allow the leash to get a little longer to see what happens. Like, I think, you know, you can make a decision and we're like, they were so great in the first 90 days. It's relatively easy to be fired up for a new job, be all in for the first 90 days. And as that year continuously goes on, so I don't want to rush into, you know, obviously right away when it's really bad, but sometimes when it's good, you can't make that final decision. And it goes back to what you're saying, the visibility, the consistency of handing them opportunities of growth and seeing where you can continuously push them, because some people are going to max out at some point, or they're not going to want to go to the next level or the next job, or they're not fit for it. And it's kind of finding that point with each person in order to make the right decision.
Lori, how do you think we should continue to evolve the visibility? I know what I do with my clients and how I push them to get more visibility, but what do you see as, how do we create more visibility to help us make better decisions?
Well, first of all, I think the remote working situation has made this even worse, right?
Shaking me bullshit. Shaking me bullshit.
Zoom is going back to the office.
Shaking me bullshit.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit.
So you're not really watching somebody in the office anyway.
Here's why. I'm not saying remote work is bullshit, right? What I'm saying is that when you're trying to get to know someone and watching them, excuse me, there's a bug flying around. When you're trying to watch how they interact with their team players, how do they interact with external people who come into our building, right? All of those things, very difficult, right, to watch. You're only seeing them on calls, right? So it's, all I'm suggesting is that it's a little bit harder, or a little bit takes a little bit longer to see that. But I also think, you know, sometimes, and I guess this is a question I wonder, you know, for Dion, if sometimes people come from other cultures that are right, they have total autonomy, right? The culture's totally different. Now all of a sudden they come into this new place where the culture's totally different, right? And we have a situation like this, right? So first of all, when the person has so much value that they can bring, because the skills, right? The skill set is there, and the vision is there, and have all those other things. But now they've transitioned after many, many years in one culture, which may not have been a healthy culture, right? But when you're that many years in an unhealthy culture, you begin to create, right? You begin to take on those behaviors. Now it's almost like retraining someone, right? If they want to be retrained, I think it's worth putting it in if they bring the value. If they don't want to be trained and they're not even willing to admit that this is an issue, there's nothing for me to put my time into.
So what does the visibility into them look like, though? Like, that to me is, let's put it into a real example.
One-on-one.
CEO hires a new CRO. Okay.
Right.
That's the scenario. And they're coming from another culture where they've been a successful leader, but they were in a toxic environment and they developed bad habits, right? And now you're bringing them into a high performance culture that requires a lot of communication, right? And communication is the key to creating visibility in my mind, right? Like, you're not going to film everybody all day, every day. So communication is the thing that gives you visibility. It's not micromanagement. It's, hey, I'm constantly giving in communication back and forth so that we can create the visibility we need in order to give feedback and continue to grow and be on the same page. This person feels like that amount of communication is a waste of time because they've done it on their own for so long. Why would I ever need to communicate that much with you? And so they say, sure, yeah, absolutely. But now you're at a crossroads because they're not communicating the way you expect them to. They don't feel like they need to. A ton of value for that person if you can get them to conform. So how do you continue to move the needle to make a decision that this either will or won't work, but we know we have enough information to make an educated decision?
Oh, are you at JA?
This is what happens when you deal with enough organizations. It just happens everywhere.
It happens, right?
Same problem.
So we have a situation actually like that, and the lack of communication. What I think, if they're smart enough and they're somewhat savvy enough, they start to understand, because first of all, you need to be very clear about it and very
clear on expectations. There's the first thing. Okay, great.
Number one, and clear on feedback. Authentic feedback, okay? Because if I'm not saying that this lack of communication is causing me not to be able to trust, right? Then we have a problem, right? Houston, we have a problem. So the communication is what builds trust, right?
And is that communication happening once a week? Like, Patrice Gomez says, isn't that what a weekly one-on-one is for?
So we do
you
one-on-one.
Feel like that's enough?
I think in the beginning, look, I can tell you I have 4 direct reports. And for the most part, we have weekly one-on-ones, right?
Sure.
Well, I'll let me fix that. We have 3 one-on-ones a month. The other week is a senior team meeting where we all are together, right?
Yep.
So you're watching how they interact with their peers. You're seeing how they come. Somebody's canceling your one-on-ones, right? Here's the other thing. I think one-on-ones are great, and I think senior team meetings are great. But I think there's some level of informal communication, right?
Thank you.
You go out, you meet, you're out at an external meeting, right? I'm the kind of person that comes back and I go, hey, just want to let you know I had such a great meeting with so-and-so today, right? Right. I think that's that informal building, that communication bond, right? And that trust. I don't think it's just with formal one-on-ones.
Bingo. I agree. And that is where I think people get caught in the routine and the system, and they forget that, like, as a leader, if I'm asking somebody to change behavior and I'm not just checking in with you a couple during the day, right, and going, hey, just checking in, how you doing, what's going on. And if you get no response back until you're or you check in again the next day, and that's me as the leader being responsible for fostering that communication, which I think far too many leaders are passive and saying, well, it's their responsibility, I'm going to let them do it. But you're not doing anything to help them shape that behavior to get them to where they need to be.
I love, Mark, you talk about this with our clients, but, allowing the direct report at first to kind of operate the way that they like to. Like, hey, like I prefer to get a video as the leader, but you can just write it down in a document and send me an email for now.
How do you want to do it?
I want to get you going in the right direction. I don't need you to be operating perfectly to what I want right now. Get them going in the right direction. We always talk about baby steps in the gym, baby steps, no matter what it is, when you're trying to make a change in your life, it's not changing drastically. It's not rewriting the entire system, giving them little breadcrumbs, allowing them to chew on to then get through, to then morphing it to exactly what you want when they're there for a longer period of time.
Bingo. We went way over time today. We didn't even get overtime, but excellent job, everybody. Love the conversation. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to be here tomorrow where we will cover some organizational excellence from our OTB blog. We're going to be talking about, I think it's time management. What we're talking about, which that has been a topic of conversation for all of my clients recently. So I'm excited to dive into it in terms of how do we really do it successfully and help ourselves be great and get 1% better. So have a fantastic day. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Let's get down to business.
Please don't worry about me. I'm about to let my heart speak. My friends keep telling me to leave this. So let's get down to business. Let's get down.